No one expected the morning of November 15th, 2025, to shatter everything Nancy Pelosi had built in 38 years. No one expected the most feared political operator in American history to walk out of a Senate hearing room unable to speak, hands shaking, eyes fixed on nothing. And absolutely no one expected it to begin with a question about stock trades that would unravel into something far more devastating. Tulsi Gabbard didn't need talking points that morning, didn't need advisors whispering strategy. Just one manila folder and a willingness to ask questions everyone else was too afraid to voice. This is the story of how 25 seconds of silence ended a dynasty, and how a woman worth $280 million discovered she had run out of words. Hart Senate Office Building, Room 216, 9:47. The air tasted like anticipation, metallic and sharp. Every journalist in Washington had fought for a seat. C-SPAN had positioned 4 cameras at strategic angles. CNN's senior political correspondent sat in the front row, notepad already half filled with observations about who had arrived and who hadn't. Fox News had deployed a full production crew. Even MSNBC, which had built entire segments around defending Pelosi for years, was broadcasting live. The gallery was packed beyond capacity. Security had stopped letting people in 20 minutes earlier. Those lucky enough to have seats sat pressed together, strangers sharing armrests, united by the electric sense that something historic was about to unfold. In the fourth row, partially hidden behind a man in a gray suit, sat Maria Chen. She had left Oakland at 3:30 that morning, caught the first BART train running, then splurged on a rideshare from Union Station because she couldn't risk being late. Her grandmother's jade bracelet hung loose on her thin wrist. She had lost weight since closing the Golden Dragon. Hadn't meant to. Just happened when you work prep cook shifts that start at dawn and end after dark, when every dollar matters, when grief sits in your chest like a stone you can't swallow. The photo album rested in her lap, faded red fabric, corners worn soft from years of handling. Inside, her grandmother's face smiled from behind the ribbon at the Golden Dragon's grand opening. March 12, 1988, the happiest day of Wei Lin Chen's life. She had worn her best dress, the blue one with white flowers. Her hands, calloused from decades of work, had trembled slightly as she cut the ribbon. Behind her, the restaurant's windows gleamed. The sign, freshly painted in gold and red, proclaimed a new beginning. 35 years later, Maria had locked those same doors for the final time. The windows were covered in graffiti by then. The sign had been stolen twice. The last time she had approached the restaurant, she'd had to step over a man unconscious on the sidewalk, a needle still dangling from his arm. She had called 911. They said someone would come eventually. She waited 40 minutes. No one came. That was San Francisco now. That was Nancy Pelosi's district. The placard on the empty seat beside her read, "Reserved Tenderloin Business Owners Coalition." She was supposed to be part of a group. 7 small business owners who had lost everything, who had planned to attend together, to show solidarity, to make their voices heard. But at the last minute, the others had backed out. Too expensive to fly. Too risky to miss work. Too painful to sit in that room and face the woman who had represented them while they drowned. So Maria sat alone, photo album in her lap, grandmother's bracelet on her wrist, the only witness to 35 years of work erased. At 9:52, the side door opened with a soft click that somehow carried through the crowded chamber. Nancy Pelosi entered the way she had entered every room for nearly 4 decades, like the room should feel honored by her presence. 4 aides surrounded her in a tight formation, each carrying leather folders embossed with the congressional seal, each wearing the carefully neutral expression of people who had learned never to show weakness. Pelosi's suit was cream-colored Armani, tailored so perfectly it could have been painted on. The kind of outfit that cost 3 months of Maria's current salary. Her hair hadn't moved, would never move. Professionals had spent an hour that morning ensuring every strand knew its place. Her makeup was flawless. Her smile was practiced. She nodded to the Democratic senators along the raised platform like a queen acknowledging subjects. A brief wave to the press pool, fingers moving in that distinctive way photographers had captured 10,000 times. Then she settled into the witness chair with the fluid grace of someone who had testified before Congress more often than most Americans had voted. 38 years of accumulated power sat in that chair. You could see it in her posture, perfectly straight but somehow relaxed. You could see it in the way her aides positioned themselves, ready to hand her whatever she needed before she needed it. You could see it in the glances from Democratic senators, checking her face for signals, waiting for cues. This was her world. These were her rules. She had survived challenges before. She would survive this one. 15 feet away, at the nominees' table, sat the woman who would prove her wrong. Tulsi Gabbard wore a navy suit from a department store. No designer label visible at the collar. No entourage arranged around her like defensive walls. No aides shuffling papers or typing urgent messages. She had a wedding ring, simple gold, slightly worn. A military service pin on her lapel, earned through 2 combat deployments to Iraq, the kind of decoration that couldn't be purchased or gifted or arranged through connections. And a single manila folder, closed, resting on the table in front of her. She sat perfectly still, not the stillness of someone trying to appear calm, but the genuine stillness of someone who had learned patience in places where movement could draw fire. Her eyes tracked Pelosi's entrance without her head moving. Assessment, calculation, no emotion visible on her face. In the gallery, a reporter from Politico leaned toward his colleague and whispered, "She looks calm." His colleague, who had covered combat veterans before, whispered back, "That's not calm, that's focus." Chairman Tom Cotton raised his gavel. 2 sharp cracks echoed through the chamber. The murmur of conversation died instantly. "This hearing will come to order." Cotton's voice carried the careful neutrality of someone who knew the entire world was watching, who knew every word would be analyzed, who knew history might remember this morning differently than anyone expected. "We are here to consider the nomination of Tulsi Gabbard to serve as Director of National Intelligence. Speaker Emerita Pelosi has agreed to testify regarding her concerns about this nomination." He paused, glanced at Pelosi, then at Tulsi. "Madam Speaker, you may begin." Pelosi's smile widened by perhaps a millimeter. This was her stage, had been for decades. She adjusted the microphone with practiced ease, cleared her throat softly, and began. For 12 minutes she spoke. Every word had been tested by focus groups. Every pause had been rehearsed in front of mirrors. Every gesture had been calculated for maximum impact. She raised concerns about Tulsi's trip to Syria in 2017. She questioned the judgment of someone who had appeared on Fox News, on Tucker Carlson's program specifically, and hadn't sufficiently denounced the host's positions. She used the word troubling 7 times. Concerning appeared 6 times. Questions remain became a refrain. The Democratic senators nodded in rhythm, a carefully choreographed response. Senator Whitehouse leaned forward attentively. Senator Warner maintained steady eye contact. Senator Hyerno took notes with the diligence of someone who wanted the cameras to capture her thoroughness. The press pool recorded every word. Some reporters were already drafting their opening paragraphs. Pelosi questions Gabbard's loyalty. Speaker Emerita raises security concerns. Democrats unite against intelligence nominee. When Pelosi finished, she reached for her water glass with the satisfied air of a prosecutor who had just delivered an airtight closing argument. The glass was crystal, not standard government issue. She had requested it specifically. The water was room temperature, also by request. She took a small sip, set the glass down with precision, folded her hands on the table, and waited. In the gallery, Maria Chen found herself holding her breath without meaning to. Her grandmother's photo album felt heavy in her lap. Chairman Cotton turned toward the nominee's table. His voice remained carefully neutral. "Colonel Gabbard, you may now question the witness." Something flickered across Pelosi's face. Not fear, not yet, but perhaps recognition that the script had shifted slightly from what she'd expected. She had agreed to this format after extensive negotiation, had insisted on it actually. A traditional hearing wouldn't show her strength, but questioning, that was different. That let her respond directly, immediately, let her use decades of experience to dismantle whatever amateur attacks came her way. She was Nancy Pelosi. She had destroyed more experienced opponents than this former Democrat who had switched parties. This woman half her age with a fraction of her power. Tulsi Gabbard opened her folder for the first time. The sound of paper sliding was barely audible, but somehow every person in the chamber heard it. "Thank you, Madam Speaker Emerita." Her voice was calm, not the artificial calm of deep breathing exercises and pre-testimony meditation, the natural calm of someone who had delivered briefings in combat zones where panic got people killed. "I appreciate you taking time from your schedule to be here today." A beat of silence. Pelosi's smile remained fixed. This was polite, standard, exactly what she'd expected. "I have some questions for you." Pelosi nodded slightly. Of course she did. "Madam Speaker, you expressed concerns during your testimony about my financial associations, about potential conflicts of interest, about questions regarding loyalty." Tulsi's eyes, dark and steady, never left Pelosi's face. "Let's talk about finances." The temperature in the room seemed to drop by several degrees. "What was your net worth when you entered Congress in 1987? Pelosi's smile didn't fade, but something behind her eyes shifted. A microscopic recalibration. Her fingers, resting on the table, moved almost imperceptibly, pressing slightly against the wood. "I don't have those specific figures in front of me at this moment." "I do." Tulsi glanced at a document from her folder. "According to financial disclosures you filed with the House Ethics Committee, required by law, available to the public, your net worth in 1987 was approximately $3 million. Is that accurate?" A pause, 2 seconds. "That sounds approximately correct, yes." "And your net worth today, as of your most recent financial disclosure?" Pelosi's chin lifted by perhaps a quarter inch. The practiced smile was still there, but her jaw had tightened slightly. "I'm not here to discuss my personal. $260 to $280 million. Tulsi didn't raise her voice. Didn't need to. The number hung in the air like smoke after a gunshot. Some estimates place it above $400 million. A murmur rippled through the gallery. Low, confused, shocked. In the third row, Maria Chen looked up sharply from her grandmother's photograph. $280 million. The number didn't seem real. Couldn't be real. Tulsi continued as though she had simply commented on the weather. "On a congressional salary that never exceeded $223,000 annually." The murmur grew louder. Chairman Cotton didn't reach for his gavel. He sat motionless, watching. "Let me ensure these numbers are clear for everyone." Tulsi pulled out a calculator, though she clearly didn't need it. The gesture was theatrical, deliberate. 38 years of service. Your highest annual salary, $223,000. That's approximately $6.6 million total over your entire career, before taxes. She set the calculator down, looked directly at Pelosi. "You're now worth $280 million at minimum, 42 times your total career earnings, before taxes." Pelosi's hands had moved to the edge of the table. She wasn't gripping it yet, but her fingers had found the wood and stayed there. "That's," Pelosi started, stopped. Her voice had lost some of its practiced smoothness. "My husband is a successful businessman. His investments." "Your husband's trades. Let's examine those." Tulsi withdrew another document with the unhurried precision of someone who had all the time in the world and knew it. 2008. Visa initial public offering. Paul Pelosi purchased 5,000 shares at $44 per share. 2 days later, he sold them at $64 per share. $100,000 profit in 48 hours. She looked up, met Pelosi's eyes. That was a legitimate investment opportunity available to many. During that exact period, you were actively involved in credit card legislation. Legislation that would have significantly damaged Visa's business model. Legislation that would have cost them billions in revenue. The chamber had gone very quiet. Tulsi turned a page. That legislation was blocked, never came to a vote. Visa's stock climbed steadily. Your husband made a considerable profit. Pelosi's knuckles had gone white against the dark wood of the table. The legislative process involves many factors. 2021. January 21st. Paul Pelosi purchased $1.95 million in Tesla call options. Tulsi looked up from the document, Let the date hang in the air for a moment. The next day, not the next week, not the next month, the very next day, January 22nd, President Biden announced his electric vehicle infrastructure plan, $50 billion in federal investment. Tesla stock rose 20%. She set the document down carefully. One day, Madam Speaker, your husband bought options on electric vehicle stocks one day before the president announced a massive electric vehicle infrastructure plan. A plan that you, as Speaker of the House, would have known was coming, would have helped coordinate, would have discussed in private meetings. My husband makes his own investment decisions. Pelosi's voice had hardened. The practiced warmth was gone. I don't discuss. Do you eat dinner together? Pelosi blinked. Excuse me. Dinner? Do you and your husband share meals? Discuss your respective days. Talk about work, about legislation, about what might be coming to the House floor for a vote. Silence, 3 seconds, 4, 5. I'm not going to discuss my private. It's a yes or no question, Madam Speaker. Do you and your husband ever discuss your work? Pelosi's mouth opened, closed, no sound emerged. In the gallery, Senator Whitehouse had pulled out his phone and was staring at the screen with intense concentration, not watching the hearing, watching anything else. Tulsi pulled another document from her apparently endless folder. 2022. Paul Pelosi purchased between $1 and $5 million in semiconductor stocks. Days later, not weeks, not months, but days, Congress voted on the CHIPS Act. $52 billion in subsidies for semiconductor manufacturing. You supported the bill, campaigned for it, called it essential for American competitiveness. She set the document down. The bill passed. Semiconductor stocks soared. Your husband's investment multiplied. Another document. Same year, 2022. Paul Pelosi sold 30,000 shares of Google stock. 1 month later, the Department of Justice announced a major antitrust lawsuit against Google. The stock dropped significantly. Tulsi closed the folder with a soft sound that somehow echoed in the silent chamber. Bought before good news, sold before bad news, every single time. A pattern that would make Warren Buffett weep with envy. A pattern that would make any hedge fund manager in America question their career choices. She leaned forward slightly. Either your husband is the greatest investor in American history, with precognitive abilities that would revolutionize finance, or the pause lasted 3 full seconds. Something else is happening. 5 seconds of silence followed, the kind of silence that is weight, that presses down on a room like a physical force. Pelosi's throat moved as she swallowed. The microphone caught it, amplified it, broadcast it to millions. Which is it, Madam Speaker? Pelosi opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Her lips moved, forming the beginning of a word that never arrived. She closed her mouth, opened it again, still nothing. 10 seconds of silence. That's what I thought. In the gallery, Maria Chen's grip on her photo album had tightened until her knuckles matched Pelosi's. For the first time in 18 months, since the day she had locked the Golden Dragon's doors for the final time, since the day she had stood on the sidewalk looking at 35 years of her family's work, reduced to a building with broken windows, something that felt distantly like hope stirred in her chest. If you're finding this story compelling, if you believe in accountability for those in power, hit that subscribe button. This is just the beginning, and what comes next will shock you even more. Senator Whitehouse was scrolling through his phone now, his face carefully angled away from the proceedings. Not defending Pelosi, not even watching. The first visible crack in 38 years of Democratic unity had appeared in real time. Let's discuss January 6th. Tulsi's tone hadn't changed. Still that same measured calm. The voice of someone reading a weather report, not dismantling a political dynasty. Since you raised concerns about my loyalty to this country. Pelosi's posture straightened slightly. Familiar ground. Safe ground. She had given hundreds of interviews about January 6th, had appeared on every major network, had written op-eds, had testified. This was her issue, her high ground. Her voice recovered some of its practiced authority. January 6th was a dark day in American history, an insurrection incited by. I'm not asking about the former president. Pelosi stopped mid-sentence as though she had walked into a glass door. "I'm asking about you, your responsibility, your words, your decisions." Along the raised platform, Senator Warner removed his glasses and pressed his fingers against his closed eyes. The gesture of a man who suddenly regretted his scheduling choices that morning. "You established the January 6th Select Committee," Tulsi continued. "You appointed every single member. You controlled the direction of the investigation, the witnesses called, the evidence presented." She pulled another document from her folder. Maria Chen was beginning to wonder what else was in there. How many more revelations that folder contained? Total cost to American taxpayers for that committee's work, $20 million, 18 months of hearings, primetime television specials, thousands of hours of testimony, all of it orchestrated under your direction. Tulsi looked up. That committee had access to footage filmed on January 6th by your daughter, Alexandra Pelosi, documentary footage of you, your words, your reactions, your private statements in real time as events unfolded. Something flickered across Pelosi's face. Not concern yet, but perhaps the distant recognition that the ground beneath her feet had shifted slightly. That footage was never released to the public, never played at any of the committee's televised hearings, never entered into the official record. Tulsi's voice remained level. Why not? The committee made professional decisions about which evidence best served the investigations. The committee didn't archive the footage when the congressional session ended, didn't preserve it according to standard protocols. It simply disappeared from congressional records. Tulsi paused. House Republicans had to obtain it from HBO, where your daughter had sold the documentary rights, just to see what you said that day, just to hear your own words. Pelosi's senior aide slid a note across the table toward her. Pelosi didn't glance at it. Her eyes remained fixed on Tulsi with the intensity of someone trying to predict incoming fire. 20 million taxpayer dollars, 18 months of hearings, primetime television coverage that preempted regular programming, and your own words from that day, captured by your own daughter's camera, were hidden from the American people who paid for that investigation. Nothing was hidden. The committee operated with full transparency according to. Let's test that transparency. Tulsi nodded toward the screen mounted on the chamber wall. Let's watch what you said. The lights dimmed slightly. The footage appeared grainy, shot on a phone camera in motion. The timestamp read January 6, 2021, 2:47 p.m. Nancy Pelosi's face filled the frame, her expression tight with barely controlled stress. Her hair, usually immaculate, was slightly disheveled. Her makeup was smudged at the corners. She was speaking rapidly to someone off camera. "I take responsibility for not having them be better prepared for this." Tulsi raised her hand. The video froze. Pelosi's face suspended mid-sentence, mouth half open, eyes wide with stress. "I take responsibility. Your exact words, Madam Speaker, captured by your own daughter's camera, filmed on January 6th. Pelosi's response came quickly, too quickly. The words tumbled out with the rushing energy of someone trying to outrun something. "That was taken completely out of context. What I meant was..." "Then let's watch more context." The video resumed. Pelosi was speaking to someone identified in the transcript as Terry McAuliffe, her chief of staff. Her voice had risen, sharp with frustration and something that might have been panic. "We have responsibility, Terry. We did not have any accountability for what was going on there, and we should have. This is ridiculous." Her voice climbed higher, almost shouting now, raw and unfiltered in a way the public had never seen her. "Why weren't the National Guard there to begin with?" The screen went dark. The lights came back up slowly. Pelosi sat motionless in the sudden brightness, her carefully constructed mask slipping visibly now. Tulsi let 5 full seconds of silence fill the chamber before speaking. When she did, her voice hadn't risen at all. "We have responsibility. Why wasn't the National Guard there? Your words, Madam Speaker, not taken out of context, not misquoted. Your actual statements captured on your daughter's camera, hidden from public view for 3 years." Pelosi reached for her water glass. Her hand was trembling visibly now, not dramatically, Not theatrically, just the natural tremor of someone whose nervous system had begun to recognize a threat. Her fingers closed around the glass. It tilted slightly. Water sloshed toward the rim. She lifted it, brought it halfway to her lips. Her hand shook again. More water splashed over the rim, splashing onto the table's surface, spreading across the polished wood toward her carefully arranged papers. An aide rushed forward with napkins, moving with the practiced efficiency of someone who had cleaned up after their boss before. Pelosi waved her away with a gesture sharp enough to be almost violent. The aide froze mid-reach, then retreated backward, uncertain. The papers began to darken as they absorbed the spreading water. Pelosi stared at them, at the stain spreading across her testimony notes, across her prepared remarks, across everything she had planned to say. $20 million. Tulsi's voice cut through the moment like a blade. 18 months of hearings. And this footage, you explicitly taking responsibility for security failures on January 6th, was never shown to the American people who paid for that investigation. The committee operated independently. You appointed every single member. Liz Cheney, Adam Kinzinger, your choices, your selections, your committee. Senator Whitehouse stood quietly from his seat and walked toward the exit. Not running, not rushing, just a steady, determined walk away from the proceedings. His aide would later tell reporters it was a bathroom break. He didn't return for 47 minutes. For 3 years, Madam Speaker, you told the American public that January 6th was entirely the former president's responsibility. You held hearings. You gave interviews. You appeared on every major network. You wrote op-eds. You shaped the national narrative. Tulsi's voice remained absolutely steady. But on camera, in private, you said something very different. You said, "I take responsibility." The practiced smile had vanished from Pelosi's face entirely. What remained was something harder, older, more fragile. So I have to ask you now, under oath, in front of the American people, do you stand by the words in that video? Yes or no? Do you take responsibility for the security failures of January 6th? 5 seconds of silence. 10 seconds. Senator Warner was examining his fingernails with the concentration of someone discovering hands for the first time. Pelosi started, stopped. Her mouth stayed open for a moment, then closed. The committee's findings speak for themselves. That's not what I asked. 15 seconds. The longest silence anyone in the chamber could remember at a Senate hearing. The C-SPAN timestamp counted it precisely. 15 seconds of absolute quiet while Nancy Pelosi, the most powerful woman in congressional history, sat unable to answer a simple question. The silence is your answer, Madam Speaker. In the gallery, Maria Chen watched Pelosi's face with the intensity of someone recognizing something they had always suspected but never confirmed. This woman had represented her district for 38 years, had presided over its decay while accumulating wealth beyond imagination, had given speeches about helping working families while Maria's family lost everything. And now, faced with direct questions, she had nothing to say. The photo album in Maria's hands felt heavier somehow, as though her grandmother's memory carried weight that could be measured and held. Let's talk about your district. Tulsi's tone shifted almost imperceptibly, still calm, still measured, but with something harder beneath it now, something that had been held back but was now being released in controlled doses. San Francisco, the place you've represented for 38 years. Pelosi straightened in her chair, perhaps sensing slightly safer ground, perhaps simply grateful to move away from the video footage, from the 25 seconds of silence, from questions about January 6th. I'm proud of my decades of service to San Francisco and its... Are you familiar with the Nancy Pelosi Federal Building? A flicker of something crossed Pelosi's face. Confusion, maybe, or the first stirring of recognition that there was no safe ground here, no familiar territory, no prepared responses that would work. Of course I'm honored that. 18 stories, corner of 7th and Mission Streets, your name carved in stone above the entrance, dedicated in 2010, a testament to your service. Tulsi pulled another document from her folder. How many documents were in there? How deep did this go? In August 2023, federal employees in that building received a memo from their supervisors. Do you know what it said? Pelosi hesitated. The pause lasted just a beat too long. There were various security protocols being implemented. The memo instructed federal workers to maximize telework, to stay home, not for budget reasons, not because of a pandemic, not because of a new policy initiative. Tulsi held up the document. Because of drug crime directly outside the building that bears your name, open-air drug markets, needles on the sidewalk, addicts using drugs within sight of the entrance. Federal employees, your constituents, were no longer safe walking to work at the building named after you. She set the memo down carefully. The Nancy Pelosi Federal Building, where federal workers are told to stay home because your district has become too dangerous for them to enter. Pelosi's jaw had tightened into something resembling a fist. Let me share some statistics about the district you've represented for 38 years. Tulsi didn't glance at her notes. Didn't need to. These numbers had been memorized, internalized, made part of her prepared arsenal. San Francisco, 2022. 641 fatal drug overdoses, an increase of 41% since 2019. 38,000 homeless individuals in the Bay Area. The city now spends $30 million annually, taxpayer money, cleaning needles and human feces from public streets. She paused, let the numbers register, let them sink into the silence. NBC conducted an investigation, surveyed 153 city blocks. 41 blocks had visible drug needles. 96 blocks had human feces. This is the district you've represented for 38 years. These are complex urban challenges that require comprehensive. The homeless services budget doubled during your tenure, $157 million to $364 million. The problem got worse, not better. More money, worse outcomes. Tulsi turned to face the gallery directly. Her gaze moved slowly across the rows of faces until it settled on the third row, on a woman clutching a photo album. I'd like to talk about someone who's here today. Maria Chen felt her heart stop, felt the entire chamber's attention shift like a physical weight. Every camera in the room pivoted. Every eye followed Tulsi's gaze. Maria wanted to sink into her seat, wanted to disappear, wanted to be anywhere but here with hundreds of eyes suddenly focused on her. Maria Chen, third row. Maria's hands gripped the photo album so tightly she could feel the cardboard cover bending. Ms. Chen, would you please stand? For a moment, Maria couldn't move. Her legs felt disconnected from her body. Her lungs had forgotten how to process air. But somehow, impossibly, she stood. The photo album stayed pressed against her chest where her heart was hammering so hard she was certain everyone could hear it. How long did your family own the Golden Dragon restaurant? Maria's voice emerged smaller than she'd expected, quieter, but the microphones in the chamber caught every word. 35 years. My grandmother opened it in 1988. Where was it located? Tenderloin District. The words caught in her throat like broken glass. San Francisco. When did you close? Maria's vision blurred at the edges. 2023. Why? The question hung in the air like smoke. Maria opened her mouth, closed it, tried again. The words came out broken, fractured, held together by force of will alone. The crime, we couldn't. The drugs were everywhere. The homeless blocking our door every morning. We had to clean needles off our doorstep before we could open for business. A tear escaped, traced a burning path down her cheek. 2 break-ins in 1 year. Our customers were afraid to come. We couldn't afford insurance anymore. We couldn't afford anything. Thank you, Ms. Chen. Tulsi's voice was gentle now, almost soft. But when she turned back to Pelosi, that gentleness evaporated like water on hot stone. Madam Speaker, Maria Chen's family served your district for 35 years. Her grandmother immigrated to this country with almost nothing, believing in the American dream that anyone could build something through hard work and determination. Pelosi's face had frozen into something unreadable, a mask that revealed nothing and everything at once. During the same 38 years you represented that district, your personal net worth grew from $3 million to $280 million. Tulsi paused. Let that sink in. Let the contrast crystallize. During those exact same years, while you accumulated wealth beyond imagination, Maria's family lost everything. I'm deeply sorry for anyone who has struggled with. Did you ever walk into the Golden Dragon restaurant? Pelosi blinked, her mouth opened slightly. I don't recall specifically. 35 years, 3 generations of an immigrant family, located a few blocks from your district office. Tulsi's voice hadn't risen, but something in it had sharpened like a blade being drawn. Did you ever once walk through their door? Silence, complete silence. Did you know Maria's grandmother's name? More silence, heavier now. Maria spoke then, still standing, her voice cracking but clear enough for every microphone to catch, clear enough to be heard in the farthest corners of the gallery. Her name was Wei Lin Chen. She came to America with $40 in her pocket and a dream she carried like it was made of gold. She worked 18-hour days for 30 years. She believed in this country with everything she had. Maria opened the photo album with trembling hands, held up the faded photograph, the image of her grandmother on opening day, scissors raised to cut the ribbon, face radiant with joy. This is her. Opening day 1988, the happiest day of her life. Tears were streaming freely now, but Maria's voice held steady. She died last year, 6 months before we had to close the restaurant. I thank God every day that she didn't live to see it, that she died still believing in America, still believing in her representative. Pelosi sat motionless. No prepared response existed for this moment. No tested talking point could meet it. No focus group had anticipated this. You're not a public servant, Madam Speaker. Tulsi's voice was quiet now, almost gentle, almost. You're a protected class of one. Maria sank back into her seat. Throughout the gallery, people were wiping their eyes. Even some of the Republican senators looked moved, faces carefully controlled but eyes betraying emotion. In the press pool, a reporter from CNN had stopped typing, just sat with her hands hovering over the keyboard, staring at nothing. May 28, 2022, Napa County, California. Pelosi's face tightened like a fist clenching. Her entire body seemed to contract slightly, shoulders drawing inward, spine curving infractionally. That was a private family matter that has no relevance to. Your husband Paul was arrested at 11:44 p.m. Tulsi's voice carried no inflection, pure recitation of facts. He was driving a 2021 Porsche, vehicle value approximately $100,000, blood alcohol content 0.082. The legal limit in California is 0.08. He accepted responsibility and let's examine what accepting responsibility looked like for Paul Pelosi. Tulsi nodded toward the screen. The dash cam footage appeared harsh and overexposed. Paul Pelosi, 82 years old, standing beside a Porsche that cost more than most Americans earned in 2 years. He swayed slightly, struggled to maintain balance. The officer's voice came through clearly, concerned and deferential at once. I don't feel comfortable having you perform this test. I don't want you to have the potential of falling over. A pause in the footage. Then the officer's voice again, unmistakably saying, I'll discuss with my supervisors to see what they're willing to do just because we know you're a high-profile person. Tulsi paused the video. Let those words echo in the silent chamber. High-profile person, special treatment, different rules. She pulled court documents from her folder. Paul Pelosi was sentenced to 5 days in county jail. Credit for time served, credit for good behavior. Total time actually served, 0 days, 0. She looked up, met Pelosi's eyes directly. Fines totaled approximately $7,000. For a family worth $280 million, that's less than most Americans pay in monthly rent. It's a parking ticket. It's nothing. Pelosi's hands were shaking visibly now. Not a tremor, a shake. Papers lay scattered across the wet table surface, darkened with water, impossible to organize. She made no move to gather them. The day after your husband's drunk driving arrest, less than 24 hours after he was booked into county jail, you delivered the commencement address at Brown University. Tulsi's voice remained absolutely level. Your spokesperson described the arrest as a private matter. What was I supposed to? The 48-year-old driver of the Jeep your husband struck. Did he receive an apology? Silence descended like a weight. 5 seconds, 10. Yes or no, Madam Speaker. Did you or your husband ever personally apologize to the other driver? 15 seconds of nothing. Pelosi's mouth opened, closed, opened again. No words emerged. The average American serves jail time for DUI convictions. Paul Pelosi served 0 days because, in the officer's own words caught on his own camera, he's a high-profile person. Along the raised platform, Senator Warner was openly scrolling through his phone now, not even pretending to watch. Senator Hyerno leaned toward an aide, whispered something urgent, then shook her head slowly like someone who had just realized something terrible. "Rules for thee," Tulsi said quietly, "not for me." She pulled another document. This folder was apparently bottomless. How much more could there be? How deep did this go? January 28th, 2021. You held a press conference 3 weeks after January 6th. You told reporters, and I quote, "We will probably need a supplemental for more security for members when the enemy is within the House of Representatives." Pelosi's eyes widened fractionally, barely perceptible, but the cameras caught it. You called your fellow elected members of Congress the enemy, on camera, to the national press, the enemy within. I was referring to specific documented threats. Name them. Which members were you calling the enemy? Which colleagues did you believe posed such a threat that they warranted that language? Silence. You demanded taxpayer money, millions of dollars in additional security funding, to protect yourself from colleagues you publicly labeled enemies. What evidence did you present? What charges were filed? What investigations were opened? Nothing. You threw that word around, enemy, with no proof, no charges, no consequences. Just a public smear against fellow members of Congress. Tulsi leaned forward slightly. In 2024, when President Trump used the phrase enemy within to describe political opponents, Democrats across the country expressed outrage, called it dangerous rhetoric, demanded accountability, said it was un-American and threatened democracy itself. She paused, but you used that exact phrase first. In 2021, about your own colleagues. Where was the outrage then? Pelosi's mascara had begun to run at the corners of her eyes. Whether from tears or sweat, the cameras couldn't determine. But the effect was the same. The mask was cracking in real time. February 4th, 2020, the State of the Union address. Do you remember what you did that night? No response came. Pelosi sat frozen, papers scattered, water spreading, makeup smearing. You ripped up President Trump's speech on national television, sat directly behind him in the speaker's chair and tore his speech into pieces. 4 times, methodically. The cameras caught every tear. Tulsi's voice remained steady. That speech honored Charles Magee, one of the last surviving Tuskegee Airmen. It honored Gold Star families who had lost children in service to this country. It honored a 2-year-old girl who had been born at 21 weeks and survived against all odds. She paused. You ripped up a speech honoring American heroes, and you told reporters afterward that it felt liberating, that destroying a speech honoring veterans and Gold Star families made you feel free. Pelosi reached for her water glass, remembered it was empty, remembered it was lying on its side, withdrew her shaking hand and placed it flat on the wet table, fingers splayed, trying to find purchase on something solid. August 2022. Your trip to Taiwan. The Biden administration, your own party's president, explicitly discouraged the visit, warned that it would escalate tensions with China at a time when military tensions were already elevated. China issued formal warnings through diplomatic channels. I do not take orders from Beijing. You take risks with American lives. For the first time, an edge entered Tulsi's voice. Sharp, controlled, but present. The result of your visit, the largest Chinese military exercises in decades. 11 ballistic missiles launched. Some flew directly over Taiwan. 8 formal diplomatic channels suspended. Trade relationships damaged. Military tensions increased to levels not seen since the Taiwan Strait crisis. She closed her folder with a sound that was barely audible but somehow silenced the room completely. Thomas Friedman at the New York Times, not a conservative outlet by any measure, called your trip utterly reckless, dangerous, and irresponsible. His words, not mine. Tulsi stood. The gesture was subtle, but it changed the entire dynamic of the room. She wasn't towering over Pelosi, wasn't looming, just standing, but somehow it made Pelosi look smaller, older, diminished. Let me summarize what has been established here today. The chamber had gone absolutely still. No coughing, no shuffling, no whispered consultations. Even the cameras seemed to hold their breath. You've accumulated $280 million in wealth on a congressional salary that totals $6.6 million before taxes over your entire career. A 42-fold increase that defies every law of legitimate investment. You've engaged in a pattern of stock trades that show perfect timing, buying before good news, selling before bad news, in a way that suggests access to non-public information that would land any ordinary American in federal prison for insider trading. You've hidden video evidence for 3 years that shows you taking direct responsibility for January 6th security failures while publicly blaming others. You've presided over the systematic decay of your district for 38 years, rising homelessness, rising drug deaths, rising crime, while your personal wealth multiplied beyond imagination. Your husband avoided any jail time for drunk driving because, in the arresting officer's own words, he's a high-profile person. Different rules, different justice. You've called fellow elected officials enemies without evidence or consequence, then expressed outrage when others used similar language. You've ripped up speeches honoring American heroes on national television because it made you feel liberated. You've risked military conflict with a nuclear power for what amounted to a photo opportunity that served your personal brand at the expense of American security. Nancy Pelosi sat motionless amid the wreckage, the scattered papers, the spreading water stain, the smeared mascara. Senator Whitehouse still hadn't returned. Senator Warner was staring at his phone like it contained the secrets of the universe. Not a single Democratic senator had spoken in defense for more than an hour. For the first time in 38 years, Nancy Pelosi was utterly, completely alone. I have one final question, Madam Speaker. The chamber somehow became even quieter. In the gallery, Maria Chen stood without consciously deciding to. The photo album was open in her hands. Her grandmother's face looked up from the photograph, captured forever in that moment of joy. In 38 years of representing San Francisco, through your tenure as minority leader, as majority leader, as Speaker of the House, as Speaker Emerita, through all those years of accumulated power and influence and wealth. Tulsi paused, let the silence stretch. Did you ever once walk into the Golden Dragon restaurant? 5 seconds of silence descended like a physical weight. It pressed against eardrums, made breathing difficult, turned the air thick and heavy. 10 seconds. The timestamp on C-SPAN counted precisely. Pelosi's lips parted. No sound emerged. Her throat moved as she swallowed. The microphone amplified it. It was in the Tenderloin, a few blocks from your district office. 3 generations of an American immigrant family. 35 years of service to your constituents. 15 seconds. Pelosi's mouth moved, forming the beginning of words that never came. Her hands gripped the edge of the table so tightly that her fingers had gone bloodless. Did you know it existed? 20 seconds. The longest documented silence in congressional hearing history. Every camera captured it. Every microphone recorded it. Millions of Americans watching at home sat frozen, unable to look away. Pelosi's hand shot toward the water glass, forgetting it was empty, forgetting it was on its side. Her trembling fingers struck it. The glass toppled off the edge of the table entirely. It shattered on the floor with a sound that echoed through the frozen chamber like a gunshot. Crystal fragments scattered across the carpet. An aide lunged forward instinctively. Pelosi waved her away with such violence that her remaining papers went flying. Some slid across the wet table. Some fell to the floor. Some simply absorbed more water and became illegible. 25 seconds, the longest silence in recorded congressional history. Every camera captured it. Every microphone immortalized it. Across the country, millions of Americans sat motionless before their screens, watching a woman worth $280 million discover she had nothing left to say. In the gallery, Maria Chen stood with her photo album open. Her grandmother's face looked up from the page. Opening day, 1988. Wei Lin Chen cutting the ribbon in front of the Golden Dragon. The happiest day of her life. A woman who had crossed an ocean with $40 and a dream. Who had believed in America with everything she had. Who had died believing her representative cared. Pelosi stared at the spreading puddle of water. At the scattered papers. At the broken glass on the floor. At the wreckage of her carefully constructed image. 25 seconds of absolute silence. You don't even know her name. Tulsi's voice was barely above a whisper, almost gentle, almost. Wei Lin Chen. She came to this country with $40. She believed in America with her whole heart. She believed in her representative. Maria's tears fell onto the photograph, onto her grandmother's frozen smile. She died 6 months before her granddaughter had to close the family restaurant in the district you represented, while you were worth $280 million. Tulsi closed her folder for the final time. The soft sound carried through the silent chamber like a door closing on an era. Maya Angelou wrote, "When someone shows you who they are, believe them." She met Pelosi's eyes directly, held her gaze without blinking. "You've shown America who you are for 38 years, Madam Speaker." A pause, 3 seconds of wait. "I have no further questions." Silence complete, absolute, devastating. Nancy Pelosi moved then. She didn't gather her scattered papers, didn't reach for her briefcase, didn't whisper instructions to her aides or signal to her allies along the platform. She simply stood. Her hand gripped the table edge for balance, white-knuckled, visibly trembling. For a moment, it seemed she might collapse entirely. Her aide moved to help. Pelosi shook her off with a violent jerk of her arm. The aide stumbled backward, uncertain, helpless. Pelosi walked toward the exit. Not rushed, not running, but with the mechanical determination of someone whose autopilot had taken over because conscious thought had become impossible. The press pool erupted, shouted questions, camera flashes, a sudden chaos of noise after the terrible silence. "Madam Speaker, do you have a response? Will you address the allegations? What about the Golden Dragon?" She didn't stop, didn't turn, didn't acknowledge that anyone had spoken, didn't acknowledge that anyone existed. For the first time in 38 years, Nancy Pelosi had nothing to say. The door closed behind her with a soft click that somehow echoed. In the gallery, Maria Chen remained standing. Photo album open. Grandmother's face looking up at a ceiling she never could have imagined. Maria whispered so softly that only those beside her could hear. "She knows now, Grandma. She knows we existed." The hallway outside room 216 was a gauntlet of cameras and shouted questions. Pelosi's senior aide intercepted her 10 feet from the door, speaking rapidly about press strategy, about damage control, about framing the narrative. Pelosi didn't slow down, didn't acknowledge the words, "Car, now." She walked past 30 reporters, past cameras that had documented her every triumph for 4 decades, past questions that bounced off her back like rain off stone. Her face was frozen into something that wasn't quite expression, just the mask of someone who had departed the scene while their body continued moving. The motorcade waited at the curb, black SUVs with tinted windows. A door opened. She stepped inside, the door closed, the motorcade pulled away. For the first time in 38 years, Nancy Pelosi had left a press availability without speaking a single word. Inside the hearing room, reporters swarmed Maria Chen like bees to honey, microphones thrust toward her face. Cameras surrounded her, questions from every direction at once. "Ms. Chen, what did you want from today?" Maria clutched her photo album against her chest. Her grandmother's jade bracelet had left an impression in her skin from gripping it so tightly. She looked at the reporter, found words somehow. "I wanted her to know we existed. that we weren't just statistics in someone's policy brief, that 35 years of my family's work mattered to someone. Do you feel you got that? Maria was silent for a long moment. She looked down at her grandmother's face, frozen in time on opening day. Wei Lin Chen, smiling, scissors raised, ribbon waiting to be cut. She didn't know my name. She didn't know the restaurant. She represented us for 38 years, and she had no idea we ever existed. She held up the photograph so the cameras could capture it. My grandmother believed in America. She believed in her representative. She believed someone cared. Her voice broke. She died last year. I'm grateful she didn't live to see this. Maria walked out of the hearing room, out of the building, down the steps to the sidewalk where winter sunlight felt too bright after the harsh fluorescence inside. She rode the metro to Union Station, caught a flight she couldn't afford back to Oakland, took the BART to her apartment in a neighborhood where sirens were the soundtrack of night. Tomorrow morning at 6 a.m., she would be back in the restaurant kitchen where she now worked. Prep cook, minimum wage plus tips, a 2-hour commute each way, 14-hour days, hands that smelled like onions and garlic no matter how many times she washed them. But something had changed. She could feel it in her chest where the photo album still pressed against her heart. Something had shifted in the universe. Something had been acknowledged that had been ignored for too long. Within 1 hour, Pelosi Exposed was trending #1 worldwide. The clip of Tulsi saying 280 million on a congressional salary accumulated 89 million views in its first 24 hours. The 25 seconds of silence became a meme, a symbol, a cultural shorthand for political accountability finally arriving. It was looped and remixed and shared until it seemed to exist everywhere simultaneously. Someone set it to dramatic music. Someone added a timer counting the seconds. Someone created a split screen showing Pelosi's face next to Maria Chen standing in the gallery. "Did you ever walk into the Golden Dragon" became a rallying cry, spray-painted on walls in San Francisco, printed on T-shirts sold at protests, chanted at rallies, shared millions of times across every social media platform. A question that somehow contained all the frustration of everyone who had ever felt ignored by the powerful. Maria Chen's grandmother's photograph was shared 12 million times. Strangers who had never eaten Chinese food in their lives wept at the image of a woman cutting a ribbon in front of her American dream. Comments poured in from around the world. My family had a dry cleaning business. Same story. My parents ran a grocery store. I understand. This is everyone's grandmother, everyone's family, everyone's broken dream. Day 2. Polls showed 67% of Americans supported banning congressional stock trading. The number jumped to 73% among voters under 40. Day 3. Senator Josh Hawley reintroduced the Pelosi Act, preventing elected leaders from owning securities and investments. 8 Democratic senators signed on as co-sponsors. A spokesperson for Senator Warren called it necessary reform whose time has come. Day 4. Pelosi's office released a statement, carefully crafted, focus grouped, meaningless. Speaker Emerita Pelosi will not be intimidated by partisan attacks designed to distract from substantive policy discussions. She remains focused on serving the people of San Francisco. The statement was mocked so mercilessly across social media that her communications director resigned by day 5. The resignation letter was professional. The subtext was clear. This was no longer a winnable fight. Day 6. Nancy Pelosi announced she would not seek any future leadership positions in Congress. The statement was brief, dignified, final. It thanked colleagues and constituents. It mentioned nothing about the hearing. It made no reference to Tulsi Gabbard. It simply closed a chapter. Day 7. The Government Accountability Office announced a formal review of Paul and Nancy Pelosi's trading history. Following multiple congressional requests and public interest, the statement read, the GAO will examine trading patterns and potential policy implications. Day 8. The Department of Justice confirmed a preliminary review of potential securities violations. No charges had been filed. No investigation had been opened officially. But the review was real. The door had been opened. Questions would be asked that couldn't be dismissed. Day 10. The FBI received a formal referral from the Senate Ethics Committee. Details were sealed. The referral itself was public. The machinery of accountability, slow and grinding and often ineffective, had begun to turn. Day 14. Alexandra Pelosi, who had filmed the January 6 footage, posted a single tweet from her verified account. "My mother needs time with family right now. Thank you for understanding." She deleted it within an hour, but screenshots had already spread everywhere. The internet never forgets. The internet never forgives. The internet preserves everything in amber for future examination. Day 21. Tabloid rumors emerged that Paul Pelosi had filed paperwork with a divorce attorney. Papers spotted being delivered to the Napa estate. Sources close to the family suggesting separation. Neither party confirmed or denied. Lawyers issued no statements. The rumors persisted, grew, evolved into accepted fact without ever being verified. Tulsi Gabbard was confirmed as Director of National Intelligence by a vote of 54-46. 3 Democrats crossed party lines. Senator Joe Manchin, speaking to reporters afterward in the Capitol basement, put it simply, "I've been in politics for decades. I've seen a lot of hearings, a lot of testimony, a lot of political theater." He paused, chose his words carefully. "I've never seen anyone handle Nancy Pelosi like that. Colonel Gabbard earned my vote." 2 weeks after the hearing, Maria Chen's phone rang while she was prepping vegetables for lunch rush. Her hands moved automatically, knife work precise despite the exhaustion that never quite left anymore. The number was unknown. She almost didn't answer. "Ms. Chen, this is James Martinez with the San Francisco Small Business Alliance. I'm not in San Francisco anymore." Her voice was tired. Everything was tired. "I can't afford." "I know, we watched the hearing, all of us, the whole organization." Maria's knife stopped moving. "I don't understand. We're starting a fund for small businesses destroyed by what's happened to the city. Not a government program. Private donations. People who saw what you did and want to help." His voice was earnest, almost excited. "We want you to be the first recipient." Silence stretched across the phone line. Maria stared at the cutting board, at the half-chopped onions, at her hands that smelled perpetually of garlic and work. "We're talking about enough money to reopen, not in the Tenderloin, somewhere safer. A fresh start for the Golden Dragon." "Why me?" The words came out as a whisper. "Because you showed up, Ms. Chen. Because you stood in that gallery and held that photo album and told your grandmother's story. Because you made millions of people understand what those numbers mean, what those policies cost, who pays the price." A pause. "Because someone had to say it, and you did." Maria hung up the phone, stood motionless in the industrial kitchen surrounded by the noise of lunch prep, by shouted orders and clanging pans and the smell of cooking food that wasn't hers. She thought about her grandmother on opening day. The ribbon, the scissors, the $40, the dream. Maybe the Golden Dragon would rise from the ashes after all. In Napa Valley, Nancy Pelosi sat on the terrace of her vineyard estate. $25 million of rolling hills stretched toward the horizon. Vines heavy with grapes that would become wine selling for $200 a bottle. The view was spectacular. Had been photographed for Architectural Digest. Had been the backdrop for fundraisers that raised millions. Her aide approached with a tablet, footsteps careful on the stone. "Ma'am, the latest polling shows." "I don't want to see it. The subpoena from the Ethics Committee requires a response by." "I said I don't want to see anything." The aide retreated. Nancy Pelosi sat alone with her grapes, her wine, her wealth. The terrace where she had hosted senators and celebrities and heads of state, where she had stood and felt powerful and important and untouchable. And for the first time in 38 years, she sat in silence she couldn't fill. In Washington, D.C., Tulsi Gabbard arrived for her first day as Director of National Intelligence. The building was massive, imposing, heavy with the weight of secrets. Her office was smaller than she'd expected. She didn't care. Office size had never mattered in Iraq either. She placed 2 photographs on her desk, positioned them carefully where she would see them every day. The first, her unit in Iraq, brothers and sisters she had served with, some of whom hadn't come home, a reminder of what service meant, what sacrifice looked like, why the work mattered. The second, Maria Chen standing in the gallery, photo album open to her grandmother's face. Wei Lin Chen on opening day, 1988, cutting the ribbon in front of the Golden Dragon. Her senior aide noticed the second photograph during the morning briefing, pointed at it curiously. "Director, who is that?" A reminder. Tulsi straightened the frame carefully, made sure it was positioned perfectly. "Of why I'm here and who we're supposed to serve." She opened her first intelligence briefing folder. Classified documents with red borders and security warnings. Threats to national security, global developments, critical information, important work. She got to work. The vineyard produced award-winning wine that year. Critics praised the vintage with the usual florid language wine critics employ. Tourists came in waves, paid premium prices for the experience of visiting Nancy Pelosi's estate. Bottles sold for $250 each. Collectors paid even more. The grapes were perfect. The weather had cooperated. The harvest was abundant. By every metric that mattered to vineyard operators, it was a successful year. But in an Oakland restaurant kitchen, a woman with tired eyes prepped vegetables and dreamed of dragons. Golden ones, rising from ashes. Her daughter burst through the kitchen door after school, phone clutched in her hand, eyes wide with something that might have been hope. Mom, look at the GoFundMe. Look at the number." Maria wiped her hands on her apron, took the phone, stared at the screen. The number didn't seem real, couldn't be real. She refreshed the page. The number stayed the same. $400,000. "We can reopen, Mom." Her daughter was crying and laughing simultaneously, tears and joy and disbelief mixing into something that couldn't be separated. "We can actually reopen." Maria set down the phone with trembling hands, picked up her grandmother's photograph, which she now carried everywhere like a talisman, looked at Wei Lin Chen's face, frozen forever in that moment of pure happiness. "Your great-grandmother would be proud." Her voice was soft. "She always told me America gives second chances to people who don't give up." She looked around the kitchen that wasn't hers, where she prepped food for someone else's restaurant, where she had worked 14-hour days just to survive, where her hands had begun to develop arthritis from the constant repetitive motion, where she had cried in the walk-in freezer during breaks because she was too tired to wait until she got home. Then she looked at the photograph, her grandmother's smile, opening day, the ribbon, the scissors, the $40, the dream that had crossed an ocean. She picked up her knife, got back to work. Some things you have to rebuild from scratch, but you can rebuild. America still gives second chances. Dreams can die and be resurrected. Dragons can burn and rise again, golden and gleaming from their own ashes. Wei Lin Chen had believed that once, on a day in 1988 when she cut a ribbon in front of a restaurant that represented everything she had worked for. Her granddaughter believed it now, in 2025, standing in a kitchen that wasn't hers, holding a photo album and a dream that refused to die. The Golden Dragon would open again, not in the Tenderloin, somewhere safer, somewhere with customers who could walk through the door without fear, somewhere the dream could survive. Nancy Pelosi sat on her terrace and drank expensive wine and counted her millions. Maria Chen stood in a kitchen and counted the days until she could reopen her family's restaurant. Both women looked toward the future, but only one of them still believed in the American dream that had brought Wei Lin Chen across an ocean with $40 and hope. 25 seconds of silence had changed everything. 25 seconds where a woman worth $280 million had discovered she had nothing left to say. And in that silence, a nation had heard the answer to a question that had been ignored for far too long. Did you ever walk into the Golden Dragon? The silence had been answer enough.